Hi, everyone. My name is Kate James. I'm Program Coordinator for Metadata Engagement at OCLC. Today, we have a presentation on integrating artificial intelligence into metadata workflows, a collection of case studies. So we have 3 people presenting, including me, and Brendan is going to go first. And we'll have time for questions at the end.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you for coming, everybody. We see a few people come in, and feel free to just come in while I'm talking. It's okay. My name is Brendan Quinn. I'm the lead AI engineer at Northwestern University Libraries, and I'm here to talk about metadata agents in practice, so collaborative design, deployment, and evaluation in a production repository system. So this work is partially funded by the IMLS. There's a link to the grant there if you're interested in the details of the grant itself. A word about our team. So I'm here representing a big group of people. So we have a development team. I won't go over everybody's names. We have a group of subject matter experts and our leadership team as well. And just a shout out to Shima Wang, who was our new dean. Just before ChatGPT moment happened, he was our new dean, and he came in and he had a vision for generative AI at the library, and he sort of pushed it into our core strategic mission, and has bolstered our work this whole time. So this work really wouldn't have happened without him. So he's not here today, but yeah, thanks for everything. So that's our team. Here's our grant timeline. We have a 2-year grant. We're in the 2nd year of it. The first phase, which I've presented about before, and members of the team as well. So if you Google us or Google the project, we have presentations online if you want to see the history of it. But we have a digital collections chat agent that we've deployed to production for over a year now that people have been using. If you go to that website, dc.library.northwestern.edu, and you're not a Northwestern affiliate, you can use an email address to get temporary access to our chat feature. There's just a link on the page that's right in that search box there. You can see in that thumbnail, there's a little search box that's Use AI. And so it's right in the middle of our website. That gets a lot of traffic. So that was phase 1, and that was the first part of phase 1, and the second part was extracting what we learned to build that into a platform that's open source called Treetop Discovery. That's basically a semantic retrieval and chat system built on AWS services that sort of takes the Northwestern data and stuff out of the equation. So it's basically just bring your own EAD or IIIF material and get a RAG system that has nothing to do with Northwestern data. And then phase 2, which is where we are now, I put we're here now, Meadow Metadata Agent. I'll talk a little bit about what Meadow is in a minute, but that's where we're at now, building a metadata agent. And then in the future, we're going to work on doing the same thing that we did in phase 1 with this phase, where we're sort of building up our skills and knowledge and testing out the features and functionality on our own collections, and then expanding that out into tools and toolkits for other people to use. So that's phase 2. So what's our use case? Deploying a metadata agent in Meadow. So in our digital repository that we've been building for, I think 7 years now. It's been a while. It's our homegrown system. I'll talk a little bit about the technology stack, but it's basically our digital repository and DAM system. And so what we wanted to do is build a tool to enhance that metadata that we have in there with a metadata agent, and then talk about what that means for the library along the way, and our users and our services, and then also learn how to collaborate on these kind of projects. It's kind of a new thing for us to work across these groups on these types of projects. So it's a way for us to build up these skills together as an organization. So what is Meadow? This is a screenshot of our Meadow homepage. It's a staff-facing site, so if you go there, you will be blocked. And if you're not blocked, tell me, because you should be. You should get a 403 if you go there. And so what is Meadow? It's built on the Phoenix framework, which is an Elixir. Elixir is a programming language. It's built on that. And then so underneath here, we have some logos and stuff, but there's a Absinthe framework for GraphQL. We use React for the front end, and this Anubis MCP, which is a new library in Elixir for making MCP servers. So sort of combining a bunch of different technologies, and you can get a sense here of how much stuff is in Meadow, which I think is kind of cool. There's 200 collections, 200,000 works, 500,000 file sets. So we talk about it like in the sort of Goldilocks zone of like, it's just enough data to be interesting and really, like a really good amount of good information to be useful, but it's not like the whole internet or like the whole of our library collections. Like it's this really good data set for us to work off of. So that's why we picked it. So that's Meadow. I love it. It's the best. How did we get from we need a Meadow agent that creates metadata or helps us enhance metadata? Like that's a big open question, and there's like basically infinity ways to do that. And so how do we do it at Northwestern? We have this this system that we sort of borrowed from the commercial space called design sprints, and where we really get together for days on end, and we break out into groups, and we break out and come back together, and break out and come back together, and we come up with lots of ideas, and also whittle down those ideas to like something doable. And so that's like what we're trying to accomplish with a design sprint, and we ended up coming up with like 1 or 2 ideas that we went with. And so we sort of talked about all these technologies along the way, like what should we do things in AWS services? Should we do things in our Meadow application? Like where does this stuff even need to happen? And we came across the Claude Agent SDK, which was originally called the Claude Code SDK, but that confused everybody because Claude Code is already a thing. And so they renamed it the Claude Agent SDK, which I think is really good because Claude Code is really about making coding happen for someone, but the Claude Agent SDK is about sort of expanding the capabilities of Claude Code outside of the coding domain. And so for us, it's the metadata domain. And so we had to make a lot of decisions about like how we're going to use it, how we're going to bring it into our system. And one of the first big ones that we did was Claude Agent has sort of a 2-part API, like 2 endpoints. You can do queries or conversations. And queries are like, well, one-off, like sort of lob over a question and get a response back. And converse is where you're like more like working with Claude Code or one of the CLI tools where it's like a conversation and you're guiding the tool use along the way. So we started with the query, and we'll probably move to the converse format later on, but it's for now just like a one and done kind of interaction. You either reject it or approve it. So how does it actually work in terms of the system? That we have an agent that sort of sets up the situation, and then it kicks off the work to sub-agents that then do the work. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. Like you can give them different instructions, and you can also, they have different capabilities. Like the sub-agents can take a lot more turns. Like an agent can only take like, I think 5 to 10 turns, somewhere around there. I think the default is 5. But a sub-agent can take like 200 plus turns. So it can like use 200 tools to like get an answer if it needs to, if you configure it that way. So just something we had to learn along the way, like how are we going to use this system? Another thing that I wanted to talk about for a second here is like harness engineering is this like really new term from someone named Dex Horthy. I think I'm pronouncing his name properly. But the idea of like we sort of a few years ago, there's a lot of talk about prompt engineering. And then like in the past year, a lot of people are talking about context engineering. Like what do you need to provide along with your prompt that fits into the context window of the model to get a better answer? And then this is sort of like the next level up from that. And I don't love the idea of like harness engineering. Like that doesn't mean very much to me. But I do like the idea of like, there's this another thing going on here where it's like, it's not just supplying documents and prompts. It's like there's another thing where there's tools and commands and there's all these other systems involved with the SDK that you need to think about. And you can use some or all of these things. So we don't use all of these in our project, but you can like sort of mix and match all these different things now. And it's a little different than just prompting the model to get a response. Or it's a lot different, I would say. So what kinds of tools are we providing to the Meadow agent? I'll get to the like what the agent looks like in a second, but like sort of to back up to like what are we giving it access to is an MCP server with a bunch of tools, and I'll talk about MCP a little bit, but the tools here are, there's a small number of them, right? There's 4, and they can do something very specific. One of them is like interpret the visual image data, like pull down the image itself and like binary encode it and send it to the model. investigate the data itself in our system using a GraphQL API. So the tool can like retrieve controlled vocabulary terms or discover metadata about a work. The agent can do that with one tool that just interacts with our GraphQL API. It can't update anything in our GraphQL API, like it can only do queries. So that's something to note. Another interesting thing that we sort of figured out along the way is like people looking at a loading screen get bored or feel like things are broken, reasonably so. And so we added this feature to like have the sub agent can call a tool to just like send a little short message like, here, I'm doing this next, I'm gonna do this next. And you'll see what that looks like. And it's like changes, it's non-deterministic. So it's like, it's kind of cool to see like their custom loading messages basically each time. And then the last thing here is updating change plans. So the change plan, which is I'll get to next, is like, this is where the work happens. Like, what is the model actually doing? It's updating a change plan. It's not updating a work record. A note about the model context protocol, referred to as MCP a lot of the time. It's an open specification for connecting agents with tools and resources. It was built by Anthropic, the company that makes Claude. And they just actually contributed back to a new foundation, the AAIF, which is, I can't remember the name of it and I don't have my notes, but the model is open. And one interesting thing about MCP servers is that they're model agnostic. So the specification just tells you basically, here's how you create tools and prompts in the specification, but it doesn't matter if Claude is the model or if Gemini is the model or an open source model. It's agnostic about that. So this is our real MCP server. If you go to it, it also has layers of authentication built in. But that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about people here is like, should we have this authenticated, or like what parts of this maybe should we just open up to the web and models on the web? And yeah, where should we go with this? Because it is locked down to Meadow currently, but it doesn't have to be. And like you can use the GraphQL API here to get controlled vocabulary terms, and the model can do it really, really well. So there's a question of like, how much of this should be open and how much of this should we keep for ourselves, or where should we share these tools and things like that. So happy to talk about that with folks. So what is a change plan, and what is the metadata agent doing? So what happens is a staff member chooses a prompt, or they have a thing that they want to do with the metadata of a single work record for now. And then what they do is they submit the prompt, and the agent receives that prompt and a plan that gets created automatically in the system. So the plan is basically just like a placeholder for here's some place where a metadata change is going to be proposed. And then the sub-agent iterates over that prompt and uses all the tools it needs to do to get the answer, or to get the plan it wants to make. And then the last step is the human approval process, where it's, you can either approve it or reject it. So this is what it looks like. Meadow version 10.0 was released this week to production. We have this concept here of like, here's the place where you can do your prompt, but there's also, we came up with this idea of recipes, where it's like, a few prompts that like are maybe pretty common, or that you wouldn't want to have to type in every time if you wanted to, test it on a few records or whatever. So, a couple of canned ones here: add a description, add or update, replace subject headings, or fill out controlled fields if possible. So that's really what they see. It's just a write on our work record page, and there's a little auto edit button that you hit. So here's a proposed plan. So the agent went through all of its tools, and I think this one took like maybe 30 seconds or to a minute, something like that. I didn't time it, but so here's what a change plan proposal looks like. So the prompt here says, please take a look at this image and review and update the work description based on the textual and visual content. Also search LCSH for terms related to concerts and printed concert promotions and pick the most appropriate you find. Use any existing metadata to help you with context. Like, I came up with that prompt, and I could share it with my coworkers, and we can like figure out like, is this the right prompt? Did I get the right thing? But that's what I prompted, and it used all these tools. It used the visual tool to look at the image. It looked at the metadata, and so it proposed this this description that didn't exist. This record actually doesn't have a description. So it it came up with that description and extracted all the text out of it, which is great. And then also proposed these 3 subject headings. And you can see here, if I hover over the link there, it's like you can actually click that link to see like the source record, externally. So that's what a plan looks like. You can either reject it or approve it now. And if you approve it and apply it, it will go into the record. And if you reject it, it'll present you with your prompt again if you want to like change your prompt. And we're basically like at this phase where just do it over and see what happens again. And we'll iterate towards future systems or future versions of the system where these things will be editable here. So it's like if I don't like that, or if they made a mistake on that specific word, like I'll just edit it here. Or if one of these subjects isn't appropriate, an X button to just get rid of that one. So there's like this human curation component that we're going to build into it. But for now, it's just like one and done kind of a thing. Here's a couple of our learnings that we did along the way. This is my favorite slide. It's like all the stuff that was like, whoa, we need to figure this out. And so this all happened like in the past month. But like we started here as like the UI had this like left and right thing, and it was really confusing, like going back and forth. So we made it just like a swapping thing where you just do your prompt and then you get the plan. And then here's like a little thing about cost. So there's 100 requests, cost us $11. That seems like a little high. So it's something for us to think about, right? You can see here there's like some undefined subject headings there, and it was we had to add some validation to this change plan based on our work records. So now those are no longer undefined anymore. It's always the LLM will get an error and repropose the plan change until it's correct, and they're not like this. And then we're trying to be responsive based on our demos and feedback like immediately. Here you can see like our summaries were really long and filled with all this white space, and we had to do some prompting to like shrink that down and make that more readable. And here, this was the thing I mentioned about the updates instead of looking at bouncing loading screens and not knowing whether it's working or not. So we had to learn a bunch along the way, so happy to talk about that stuff with folks after too. And then future work, I'll just wrap up on really quick on some of this stuff. So there's a new library-wide task force around AI-generated metadata that sort of started after we had done this. So we're going to hook up with that. One of our team members is a member already. And so I think they maybe had their first meeting while I was here. So I'm looking forward to working with that group more closely over time. And then, so editing change plans. So all this stuff is one record at a time for now, but it's actually under the hood. If you look at the code, it's based off of open search queries for a single work record, but that is actually expandable to any query. So on the back, like there's no backend change we need to make this apply to many, many works at once. We're just right now focused on like, are these tools working correctly when a person is looking at it and very carefully? Like we want to take the laps around the track so that we make sure that each piece of this is good before we talk about scaling or do it as well as we can. So yeah, extracting stuff into open source tools. So happy to talk about that. And then yeah, our grant's over next year and I'll be sad. Yeah, so thank you so much.
So, hi. So as I mentioned, for many of you when you were coming in, my name is Kate James. I'm Program Coordinator for Metadata Engagement at OCLC. So I'm here today to talk to you about some work that was done this summer with part of OCLC research specifically. So our presentation is Striking the Right Balance, Evidence-Based Strategies for Implementing Artificial Intelligence in Library Metadata Workflows. So first you'll hear from me a little bit about how we formed this working group and what our questions were that we were interested in exploring, and then you will get to hear from Jill about her specific use case at National Archives and Records Administration, as Jill was a member of our AI working group. So we have a program at OCLC called the Research Library Partnership, which is an international community of research libraries and other cultural heritage institutions, where we have programming topics that are focused for research libraries specifically, but I want to acknowledge that, again, we have other types of cultural heritage institutions that are a part of the RLP, and some of the topics that we focus on are metadata, resource sharing, and collective collections, special and distinctive collections, and research support services. So as part of our programming about metadata, we have what's called the Metadata Managers Focus Group. It's a standing peer learning group that is focused on metadata creation and management. It's been around for quite a while as a standing group, and within the Metadata Managers Focus Group, we also have occasional working groups that come up as there is a hot topic that arises that we think needs discussion. So we realized that AI and metadata use was such a topic, and we formed the Managing AI in Metadata Workflows Working Group. Just briefly, background, this didn't happen in background. Obviously, you all know about the context of ChatGPT appearing on the scene, but within our own work at OCLC, we had done this OCLC Libre learning series, Building for the Future, that talked about some key topics in research libraries. So Libre is a European Association of Research Libraries. It's a little over 400 libraries. One of the topics that was discussed in the Bridging for the Future was about collaborative learning and responsible AI considerations. We also had a Metadata Managers Focus Group discussion that was specifically about AI that was great, but we realized, okay, this is just the beginning of the discussion. This discussion continued at ALA Annual in 2024 with our program Transforming Metadata, Getting Ready for AI. Then this summer, we had the working group that met April through June 2025. So it was a very short time frame, and frankly, at a very busy time of year in the profession. So despite that, there was a huge amount of participation and interest. We decided to focus on 3 work streams. And before I talk about that, I just wanted to acknowledge this is our list of participants, and it's because of them that I have anything to say to you today beyond, hi, my name is Kate James. So these are our work streams that we focused on. So primary cataloging, workflows, metadata for special and distinctive collections, and institutional repositories. But even though there are 3 work streams going on here, you're going to hear me say some things that sound very similar for all 3 of them. And basically, our use cases ended up being mostly about exploring using AI for improving metadata quality and increasing our quantity of metadata. And at this point, you're probably thinking, isn't that what we've been talking about the past 48 hours? Yes, and I think that that's a very good thing because it confirms that we're on the right track in the questions that we're asking about how AI can be used in metadata workflows. And it's always good to know that your colleagues are having similar conversations and that it's not just some crazy idea you came up with at 2 a.m. So primary cataloging was our first work stream. So this is just your very traditional library cataloging, cataloging resources, primarily print and ebooks, but also acknowledging other formats that are part of this. And the issue that was one of the biggest issues that was talked about, no surprise, backlogs, which are a long-standing discussion with cataloging. Other uses that we explored for AI involved quality, such as improving legacy metadata, including reparative description with AI. There was also discussion of using AI to provide description for languages and scripts in which there lacked staff expertise. So please note that this was not a discussion about replacing staff with AI. This was a discussion about filling in a gap that a knowledge gap that staff had, and that it seemed unlikely would be able to be filled through more conventional means, like sending somebody to a training course and so on. It takes a long time to become proficient in a language. Our second work stream was about special and distinctive collections, which is the one that Jill was focused on. And so this had some very interesting discussions, again, about quality and quantity. We talked about using AI for entity management, which is certainly an issue that is reflected in discussions with the primary cataloging workflows and also the third work stream in institutional repositories. This one had this sort of unique requirement about meeting accessibility needs, and this is because of digital collections and things that are happening in the United States with ADA Title II compliance. So there was interest in exploring using AI for being able to meet those requirements, increasing discoverability of collections by providing metadata at an item level, which is often impossible for these kinds of special collections that we're talking about with archival collections that can involve thousands and thousands of documents, so that you could never have human labor at scale to describe those. And note that backlog is a term that was used in the primary cataloging work streams, and I think is really specific to that traditional library cataloging context. It's really just another way of describing the same issue of we have this huge quantity of materials that are not described, therefore they're not discoverable. Then finally, we have our third work stream of institutional repositories. So the use cases here focused on improving the deposit process, and it's a self-deposit process, by providing missing data elements and correcting errors. So this is ultimately addressing incomplete or erroneous metadata at submission and enhancing the legacy metadata with missing data elements, correcting errors. So it's very much a quality issue here that's being focused on. Another issue that came up with enhancing metadata was being able to manage entity relationships, which is part of entity management. And then this was unique to the institutional repositories, providing the publication status for the contributors. And so providing the publication status is unique for the institutional repositories, but it's also more broadly an example of metadata, which is metadata about your metadata. And that is a theme that's already common to our other work streams involving the traditional cataloging data and describing special distinctive collections with archival description. And here I'm really thinking about finding aids with EAD and digital libraries metadata. So even though the work streams had some very different specific needs, the common themes were seen throughout. So after these discussions at OCLC, we took a look at all the use cases and noted what our working group members were reporting as potentially the most promising. And these involved quantity, because basically people, we're fairly in agreement that, you take, an experienced metadata practitioner against AI and, one-for-one description, the experienced metadata practitioner is better. But when we're talking about these vast quantities of resources that have no descriptions, that there will never be enough human labor to accurately describe, or even inaccurately describe, frankly. That's where we saw the most promising solutions, and those are solutions that are addressing the capacity issue. So transcription was one of the things, and both for handwritten and printed text. Obviously, AI is changing in how well it does with these things. It's, even from just last year, it's getting better with handwriting. It's printed text. It's known to do fairly well. Audio recordings, our working group members noted that certain types of audio recordings, AI does better than others. One specific thing that sticks out in my mind is AI does better with transcribing people talking rather than people singing, which frankly makes a lot of sense to me, because as a human being, I think of all the songs that I thought had totally different lyrics for years. Yes. For example, a Rolling Stones song, Beast of Burden. It's not Never Leave Your Pizza Burnin'. But it makes sense to me that AI can make the same kinds of mistakes that humans can make with singing. There is usually a wealth of spoken word audio recordings that are available for transcription. Another one was providing captions of audio and video recordings and alt text and tags for images. Now, all of these are very much focused on meeting accessibility requirements. And even though I'm talking about this in terms of accessibility requirements, please note that as libraries and other cultural heritage institutes really value serving users, that they're not just doing this to meet a legal requirement. They very much want to do this to better serve their users. Translation, which I wanted to point out, not transcription, which would be, again, providing the text that is present, and not transliteration, which would be providing one script into the equivalent from one script into another script. But translating, so taking what's in French and providing it in English, AI actually does pretty well with this, and it's gotten better. A lot of us have been using AI for translating for years and might not even realize it with Google Translate. And while this is often not directly provided in the metadata that users have, it's certainly an aid to the metadata practitioner to have a translation available and being able to provide better resource description. And then finally, identifying and resolving person entities. So, what do we need in order to explore and successfully implement these solutions? So we have to lay the groundwork, and these are not necessarily in a chronological order. we do need a rigorous assessment of the AI tool, and when I say rigorous assessment, these are just a few of the factors that should be considered: cost-benefit analysis, error rate, and when focusing on error rate, it's important to first ask, well, what does it mean to say that this is an error? What's considered an error? Then to ask yourself, what is an acceptable number for an error rate, and how does it compare to an acceptable human error rate? Because a lot of people say, like, AI's got to be 100% accurate for us to use it. I can tell you, having been a cataloger for many years, perhaps in an individual record level, I could have been 100% accurate, but I was certainly not 100% accurate every day I worked. I tried to be, but it's just being human. Then having the right tool for the right purpose is very important. There's different types of AI that are better at different types of tasks, and there's also a big difference between the AI that is commercially available and the AI that might be done in-house with qualified programmers. Having principles for responsible use is very important, and these principles will inform the best practices in the daily work. And I said that these are not in chronological order because one thing that happens is, because AI is so new, it's hard to know what the principles for responsible use are when you haven't used it yet. And so using it helps to inform what your principles should be and what your best practices should be. So basically, these things probably happen sort of all at the same time and continue to refine each other. So we also talked about what the components of best practices for use might look like. And of course, these would be informed by the principles that are developed for responsible use. Bias and harm is an ongoing theme. Again, what does that mean? Obviously, we've got these notions of bias, the very traditional notions that involve racism and misogyny that crop up in AI because of how the models were trained. But then there's also sort of unintentional bias that happens because of what we didn't train the model on, user communities that need to be served but perhaps not considered. Privacy is also an issue, and this is where it's important for human beings to stay involved, because human beings have judgment about what's appropriate, what level of information is appropriate to provide, and what is not. And again, you can train AI models on this, but it's always important to have a human checking to make sure it's okay. Intellectual property, which we often talk about in a legal context, but also as an ethical issue with using AI, is important to have. Again, selecting those tools for the tasks that are appropriate. Data provenance was an issue that came up a lot for unreviewed AI output. How it's provided is going to be very dependent on the institution, the type of metadata, and so on, but there was definitely agreement about being able to provide this for end users who were seeing this, and also for the staff behind the scenes to be able to know that status. And notice I say unreviewed AI output. One of the things that we talked about in, there isn't 100% consensus on this, but at a certain point, when is it no longer unreviewed AI? When has it become reviewed enough by a human being to be able to say, this is just as if a human had done it originally. It's no longer AI generated. So that's important to be able to update our data provenance information to change that status as human beings review it. And ongoing quality checks are important, including confidence scores. How confident are we that this metadata is accurate? We also talked about the ongoing considerations that are needed for implementing AI. An issue that came up very early in discussions was maintaining staff satisfaction and expertise, because if we're having AI do these tasks, and some of them are more simple tasks that, for example, catalogers who are new to an institution, new to the profession, you don't start them out on the hardest thing you've ever seen. You don't start them out on, here's a Japanese translation of an Arabic manuscript and it's in fragments, and so you're gonna have to work really hard to figure out what it says. You start them out with a book. So usually, it depends on the institution, but you start them out with something easier. Here's a book in your native language. It's published in the 20th century, 21st century. It's a self-describing resource. And then gradually these staff accumulate the skills to be able to describe that very difficult manuscript example I just made up off the top of my head. But we need to still have materials that can train our staff to develop that expertise. And we also need to keep our staff engaged, because, again, just constantly reviewing AI data for errors is very boring. So how do we keep people interested in the work so we will have people to do the work? Bias awareness is always something to keep in mind. A periodic evaluation of the AI tools as things change a lot. Prompts that worked a couple of weeks ago might not work now and might not work a few months from now. And tools, again, as there are updates, they can sort of radically change in how they're performed and what types of tasks they're good at. And that's also part of the changing AI landscape to keep in mind. So we publish blogs about the work of all of these different work streams and the overall discussions of our AI working groups on our Hanging Together blog site. So please check those out for more information. And now Jill is going to talk to you about her work with using AI at NARA.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, Kate and Brendan, for your presentation. I'm the Catalog and Online Access Director at the National Archives and Records Administration. And as Kate mentioned earlier, I had the opportunity to participate in the OCLC Metadata Workflows Working Group, particularly on the special collections workflow group there. And today I'll be presenting about some of NARA's AI testing and evaluation projects and a groundbreaking initiative that we had with one of our partners that also includes a community engagement aspect. And these are examples and use cases that I shared within the working group as we developed some prototype workflows. Just a little bit about the National Archives. We preserve the records of the United States and make them available to American people. We have the presidential libraries as part of our organization, and we continue to work to make the 13.5 billion pages of textual records and millions of images and billions of electronic records available and accessible online. And so we have large digitization efforts underway, as well as efforts to expand access to born electronic records. And in the online catalog, we've been continuing to increase online access. Over the years, we're working toward a goal to have 500 million pages available in the catalog by the end of 2026. And we are on our way and making good progress. And we have 455 million pages available in the catalog now. And one key aspect of our online access program is related to the Citizen Archivist program. And so this is our volunteer and crowdsourcing effort. And I'll be talking about how we have used AI along with crowdsourcing and how that's been received by the Citizen Archivist community. So we've been having the Citizen Archivist do a lot of tagging and transcription, and they also have the ability to comment on any description in the catalog, although we do provide suggestions and put together Citizen Archivist missions that are available to them to highlight really high interest records, they have different things around themes for anniversaries and other high interest records. And we have leveraged some models that we used for making the 1950s census more accessible online and incorporating AI there, and have built on that further. With the 1950 census, we worked with Amazon Web Services and Textract to extract names and places and ages from those census forms, and then the citizen archivists and volunteers, anyone could log in and see what was labeled as AI suggested that was enhancing the search index, but they could clean it up or flag any issues as they go. And so this was part of our plans to make sure that the use of the AI-generated metadata was as transparent as possible and that there was a citizen engagement aspect to it. So we started working more recently in anticipation of the 250th anniversary coming up in July 4th. And so we are doing a special mission around the Revolutionary War pension files. And so we had begun having the citizen archivists, they had transcribed about 30,000 pages, and the overall group for this is 2.3 million pages, sorry. So they had done, as a volunteer effort, 30,000 pages, and we began working with our digitization partner, Family Search, to have them use that as a ground truth data set and further develop an in-house AI extraction tool for handwritten records that they were working on. So then they contributed that back to us for those 2.3 million pages, and we made it available in the catalog in a user interface for the citizen archivist so they can copy and paste it over into the transcription field that they can contribute, and then they can clean it up over there and improve on that. And this has been very well received by the citizen archivists, who for a few years have been saying they would love to be able to transcribe more, and that AI first pass would really help accelerate that effort, and they said they really feel like it has jump-started their efforts here. And we took a lot of feedback and input from them on what they wanted the interface and the user experience to look like. And this project has received a lot of positive feedback from the citizen archivists. We've seen high levels of engagement, and it also came at a time where we were getting more attention at NARA for the citizen archivist program and cursive transcription overall. There was a campaign around is reading cursive your superpower? And so we've had some press, national press. I was on NBC Nightly News, which was exciting. And you can see the surge in interest from the users and how much more they've been getting done. So before, in 2024, in June, we had about 200,000 registered catalog users, and many of them are citizen archivists. And as of this past June, we had more than 300,000, so it was a 50% increase in the number of folks signing up for accounts. And in 2024, the user community transcribed about 300,000 pages, and now this past year, they transcribed more than 2.1 million. And so this AI work, it has really been a game changer and really increased engagement, and the feedback from that user community and being transparent and discussing with them what was going to work for them has been very fruitful. We're continuing to work with Family Search through that partnership, looking at additional series that are high interest to genealogists, family historians, local historians, so we're going to keep iterating and growing this. Next, I'll talk a little bit about our AI-assisted description, testing, and evaluation effort that we did in-house. And I'll be talking about some Amazon Web Services tools that we used for this effort, but that's by no means an endorsement, and we will be continuing to compare it to other tools. This is just what the sandbox that was available at the time and the developer that was available at the time to work with us on this in-house. And so our goal was to save time for describers with born digital records, focusing on reports and structured publications that would be going into the online catalog, to save them time and use the self-reported confidence scores from the tool to be able to identify which descriptions may be needed to be spot checked and reviewed, which elements were there greater confidence, such as extracting standardized titles, publication titles. And we were also looking to do similar things to many of the other efforts we had discussed in common in terms of adding access points and subject terms with the goal of increasing public access. So these are some of the tools that we used for this effort. We were using Bedrock and SageMaker, and then we used Claude. We also did some testing with Llama as well, and we had Claude's temperature turned down so that it would stick very closely to the text and kind of summarize in a more neutral voice there. Some of the metrics that we found here related to the different rounds of testing that we did and the revision of the prompts that we did as we went along. And so in terms of our first prompt, we added a lot more detail in terms of using our metadata standards in round 2, and then asking the Claude tool to extract dates as well as titles. And so between round 1 and 2, it was a lot on the prompt engineering side that we made revisions and saw better results. And these were descriptions that we were asking Claude to generate that we had fully described in the catalog, so we had that as a comparison. And we had the catalog team then review the AI generated, and we had several people provide scores and provided averages for that. We, in round 3, focused on, for the subset that we used for the testing, we asked Claude to summarize the reports and publications. And then in round 4, we kind of split it in parts, A and B, where we asked the tool to suggest tags, subject tags, and also identify people, places, and organizations based on the full text, the OCR, and the PDF, or alternately suggest those terms based on its own summary. And so we found that it did a much better job, that with more accuracy and relevance to the subject terms and tags that were suggested based on the full text of the report versus the AI-generated summary. So that was sort of interesting. One other takeaway that we had was how the tool, it's self-reporting, it was data element by data element. The tool was generally giving itself an A once we kind of got to round 2. It thinks it's an A student. And so, but our scores kind of giving it more like a passing grade, but you can kind of still see the kind of the parallel to that. And that was really useful for us to know and see. And it was something that one of our lessons learned and takeaways was that really if we were going to identify ways that we would sample for review, that if it was giving itself lower than a 90 or a 92, that was something we really wanted to look at, that it's probably really was something that was going to need review, and it wasn't very confident in its extraction or summary there. So ended up being really useful for us to inform future efforts or where we would pilot and then review and see how that went. So there's definitely potential using this as a first draft. We felt like we often are going to be facing a lot of challenges at NARA based on the scale of the records, especially for Born Digital, and this could be a great way to describe down to the item level or provide that first pass, and then using confidence scores help us identify where we would go in and review and maybe revise, and we would continue to move forward, still keeping in mind the importance of labeling the AI-generated content really transparently for the user so that they're able to make informed decisions as they're reviewing things. So. Just again, thank you, and I know we have, I think, maybe just a little bit of time for questions, but I'll hand it back to Kate. Thank you.
I think you talked about a confidence score. Do you have like a specific number you will try to achieve? Because one time I heard people saying, you know, yes, AI probably can do a lot, and also even the minor error rate can be enlarged so much. For example, a human being may be able to do 100 records a month, but AI could do it in a few minutes. So that lower error rates actually create a lot of metadata may not be that good. So I'm just wondering, what is your confidence score? You will feel confident enough, no human review needed.
I think, do I need to push? Oh, here we go. So that's a great question. We were originally going in thinking that for the human scoring of it, we were looking for, again, better than like a 75% accuracy across the board. But in terms of what was self-reported, we were looking for those high 90s sort of numbers, and definitely having more confidence in when we were asking it to extract titles, dates, and those sorts of things from the text versus that summary. So we maybe would revisit. But otherwise, it was very regularly getting high 90s for titles and dates and some of these other items that would save time. Yeah.
Yeah, this is for Jill. So in the 1950 census, AI assisted handwriting recognition. The agency felt comfortable presenting that as AI assisted and not perfect. Are you also comfortable with possibly pushing AI assisted description into production with that same framing?
We're discussing putting it alongside. So it would be that there would still be room for instance, for an item photograph, a scope and content node, and then there may be below that appearing an AI suggested caption or description of the image. And that's some of what we've been exploring right now, and having discussions around our metadata standards and data model so that they would sort of be able to be side by side. And so we're just continuing to explore that and have discussions around it right now. I think we would probably build on the AI generated transcriptions and then move on to tags and subject headings, and then probably build our way up from there and see what lessons learned we have based on that pathway. Yeah.
This question is for Brandon.
Sure.
Could you talk about how you got the cost and just
Just keep
sure.
talking about that. Thanks. So the Claude Agent SDK actually at the end of your final response, it gives you the cost in terms of cents to the dollar. So we use a background process, a logging system in Elixir, so that every time the request finishes, it goes straight to an S3 bucket as just a little JSON, and so we can do like metrics aggregation over like how many cents did it cost us in this month, or how many tokens did we use in the past 3 days, or whatever, and so it's like a query interface. Sure.
So is that per query or per record? That
Per
$11?
query. Yeah, for each time a person runs a prompt and hits submit.
Dang.
Yeah, like 10 cents sometimes. Yeah, something to think about, right?
Thanks, folks. This is Diana Marsh from University of Maryland. I was really curious from Kate, your comments about possible reparative description for AI and some of those sort of like responsibility parameters. And then I guess for the room, the whole lineup here, how you're thinking about community collections that might have community knowledge in them and consent for like using the tools in the first place. And of course, it's like a chicken and egg, because if you don't know what's in your collection, you can't really do community outreach. But if you do run tools on community information without consent from community, that can break trust. So I was just curious if like the collections you all are working with you're pretty sure they don't have that kind of information in them, or whether you're sort of like thinking about this in other ways institutionally, either at NARA or Northwestern.
So that was an issue that the working groups were exploring, and so the use cases were based on their institutions and their collections, and I will say that that was an issue that I think that the primary cataloging workflows group discussed, and so it was, again, sort of more traditional library resources and just looking at what was in the catalog. So I would say that community consent was not necessarily an issue. I also say that it was more of a theoretical discussion than a practical discussion. Basically, when we talked about use cases, and the problem was about the importance of context, and how, and we were left with questions about, well, how do we teach AI about the appropriate context of this, and there was very much a realization that this is not, we wouldn't want to turn AI loose on the catalog and just have it changing things because it could do things very inappropriately. So I would say that we didn't get that far in that discussion. It would be good for further exploration, but That's also going to the question of considering the right tool for the right task, and that might be definitely a rigorous testing of different AI tools. And also the answer at the end of the day might be AI isn't the right tool for this, that there might be a better tool for this. And there's also, at the end of the day, that it wouldn't be something that would be unreviewed by humans, that if AI is going to be looking at this potentially problematic metadata, we don't want to make something that is already known to be problematic worse. So there's definitely a case that would be an aid in efficiency for humans, but not a replacement.
And I don't have too much to add because I'm not a cataloger anymore. 15 years ago I was, but we do have a group of people on campus or at the library who talk about cataloging and social justice issues and agency and things like that. But I would say that this is sort of like a continuation of a problem that we've always had, right? Like it's maybe just a scaled up version of it, but like we've always had this problem of like cataloging specialists working separate from the communities that they're, that we have collected their materials from. I think that's always been the case.